What's up, everyone? Welcome back. We've got a massive update today about the future of one of Toronto's most important players and what the Blue Jays might do if negotiations get complicated. This offseason is heating up fast. The rumors are flying, and we're heading toward decisions that could shape the next decade of this franchise. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any breaking news. All right, let's get right into it. The biggest question hovering over Toronto's entire offseason has finally reached a critical point. What do they do with Bo Bichette? The franchise shortstop, the face of this team for nearly a decade, is heading into free agency and looking for a contract that, by all projections, could easily surpass $200 million. Nobody's questioning Bo's importance to the Blue Jays' identity. He's been the guy, the homegrown star the player fans have watched develop from prospect to superstar. But that kind of money naturally creates internal debate, especially when you consider the complete picture of what you're paying for. Bo's defensive limitations are well documented across the league. He's not a Gold Glove shortstop, and most evaluators believe he'll need to move positions at some point in the near future, probably to second base. On top of that, the past 2 years have been marked by injuries that have limited his availability and raised legitimate questions about durability moving forward. His offensive talent is still elite when healthy. Nobody's arguing that. But durability and defense carry significant weight when you're talking about committing $200 million over multiple years to a player entering his late 20s. After Toronto spent aggressively to acquire Dylan Cease, it became crystal clear that Ross Atkins is willing to spend money to keep this team competitive and ready to contend for a World Series. But spending money doesn't automatically mean paying any price to keep everyone. There's a massive difference between being financially aggressive and making a commitment that limits your future flexibility and hamstrings the organization for years if things go wrong. That's exactly where an unexpected and extremely intriguing scenario has started gaining serious traction behind the scenes. According to Kerry Miller over at Bleacher Report, if Toronto concludes that Bo's asking price can't be justified within their competitive structure, there's a plan B that's being described as a legitimate dream scenario, trading for Ketel Marte from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, I know that idea might sound bold, maybe even unlikely at first, but when you actually break down the numbers and the fit, it makes a ton of sense. Marty still has 6 years and $76 million remaining on his contract with Arizona. When you put that number next to what Bo is projected to get, probably something like 7 years and $200 million or more, the financial gap is absolutely massive. For many analysts and front office people around the league, Marte's contract is already considered one of the biggest bargains in baseball. And when you look at what he actually delivers on the field, the reason becomes immediately obvious. Unlike Bo, who's likely going to need to change positions over time because of his defensive limitations, Marte is already a proven and reliable defender at second base. That eliminates a major structural concern for Toronto and allows them to envision a more balanced and consistent infield without worrying about future defensive regression or awkward position changes. That stability matters when you're building a championship roster. Offensively, Marte is operating at an elite level right now. Over the last 3 seasons, he's produced 16 wins above replacement, which is an absurd number for any infielder. He's slashing around .283, .368, .519, with roughly 30 home runs per season and elite base running ability. And here's the kicker. Even at 32 years old, he's showing absolutely no signs of decline. That's extremely rare for players in his age range who carry this level of responsibility and workload. Most guys are starting to fade by now. Marte is still producing like he's in his prime. The only real obstacle, and Miller points this out clearly, is the cost in prospects and assets it would take to acquire Marte from Arizona. Toronto would need to give up significant pieces from their farm system, and the Diamondbacks certainly won't part with a player of his caliber without getting a return that genuinely makes sense for their rebuild or contention timeline. This isn't a simple deal. It's not going to be cheap, and that's exactly why this scenario exists as Plan B, not the primary plan. But the logic here is really compelling when you think about it. The alternative to paying $200 million for Bo is investing roughly half that amount into acquiring Marte, a more complete defender, more physically stable over the past few years, and equally explosive offensively when you compare their recent production. The math starts leaning heavily in favor of the Diamondbacks' star when you factor in contract value, defensive reliability, and health track record. That's why this rumor has gained so much momentum over the past week. For a team that made the playoffs and wants to remain among the American League elite, impact moves that also make financial sense are absolutely crucial. You can't just throw money at problems and hope it works out. You need smart resource allocation that maximizes value while maintaining flexibility to address other roster needs. The winter meetings are coming up fast, and everything suggests we're going to see even more smoke around this situation, especially if negotiations with Bo start to stall or if his asking price stays firm at a number Toronto isn't comfortable reaching. The Blue Jays have flexibility right now. They have financial resources. They have urgency to win with this core before the window potentially closes. The big question is how far Ross Atkins is willing to go to secure an infield capable of keeping Toronto in legitimate contention for a championship. Let's think about what a Ketel Marte trade would actually require. Arizona isn't desperate to move him. His contract is a bargain, and he's a key piece of their lineup. So Toronto would need to make it worth their while. You're probably talking about at least one top 10 organizational prospect, maybe two, plus additional pieces to balance the deal. That's a significant investment in terms of future assets. But when you compare giving up prospects versus committing an extra $100+ million in payroll to Bo, the calculus changes. The prospect cost is real, but it's also finite. You know exactly what you're giving up. With a massive free agent contract, you're gambling on future performance, health, and aging curves. There's inherent risk in both approaches, but the risk profiles are different. Trading for Marte means you're getting a known commodity with a reasonable contract already in place. Signing Bo means you're betting on continued production and health over the next 7+ years. Another factor to consider is positional flexibility. Marty has played primarily second base recently, but has experience at shortstop and center field from earlier in his career. That versatility could be valuable depending on how Toronto constructs the rest of their infield. If they end up signing someone like Kyle Tucker or making another significant addition, having someone who can move around defensively creates options. Bo, meanwhile, is increasingly viewed as a player who needs to move off shortstop sooner rather than later. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it does complicate roster construction. If you're moving Bo to second base, you need to find a shortstop. If you're keeping him at short despite defensive concerns, you're accepting subpar defense at a premium position. With Marte, you're getting plus defense at second immediately with no questions asked. The emotional component of this decision can't be ignored either. Bo Bichette is a franchise icon, a homegrown star who's been with the organization since he was drafted. Trading away or letting walk a player like that, especially one who's still productive, is never easy. There's fan attachment, there's organizational pride in developing talent, there's the message it sends about loyalty and commitment to homegrown players. Those factors matter, even if they shouldn't necessarily override baseball decisions. But front offices can't make decisions purely on sentiment. If the baseball ops department concludes that Ketel Marte represents better value for the organization's championship window than paying Bo $200 million, they have to be willing to make that call, even if it's unpopular initially. Ross Atkins has shown willingness to make tough decisions before. This would be another big one. Timing is critical here. The winter meetings start next week, and that's historically when big moves happen. If Toronto is serious about pursuing Marte as an alternative to Bo, they need to be in active discussions with Arizona right now. These trades don't happen overnight. It takes time to negotiate prospect packages, work through financial details, and get everyone on the same page. If this is genuinely being considered as Plan B, the groundwork needs to be laid now so they can execute quickly if negotiations with Bo break down. There's also the question of what Arizona wants. Are they looking to compete now or retool? If they're trying to win immediately, they might want major league ready players rather than distant prospects. If they're taking a longer view, they might prioritize high ceiling guys in the lower minors. Understanding Arizona's organizational priorities is crucial to structuring a deal that actually gets accepted. One interesting wrinkle is whether Toronto could theoretically pursue both players. Could they trade for Marte and still sign Bo, moving one of them to a different position? The money probably doesn't work, and the positional fit would be awkward, but it's worth considering whether there's any scenario where the Blue Jays don't have to choose between these options. My gut says no, it's one or the other, not both. The salary structure is fascinating when you compare these two paths. Marte at roughly $13 million annually through his age 37 season is incredibly manageable. That gives Toronto massive flexibility to spend elsewhere, on Kyle Tucker, on elite relievers, on whatever other needs arise. Bo at potentially 25 to 30 million annually through his mid-30s would eat up significant payroll space and limit flexibility. From a pure roster construction standpoint, the Marte route allows for more balanced team building. Health and durability have to factor into this analysis heavily. Bo has dealt with injuries the past 2 years that have limited his games played and potentially impacted his performance. Marte has been remarkably durable over his career, rarely missing significant time. When you're committing long-term money or trading valuable assets, getting a player who's going to be available every day matters enormously. You can't help your team from the injured list. There's also the question of offensive environment and ballpark factors. Marte plays half his games in Arizona, which is generally considered a hitter-friendly environment. Bo plays half his games in Toronto, which has been less favorable for hitters recently, depending on how the ball carries. Would Marty's numbers translate if he switched environments? Most scouts think yes. His quality of contact and underlying metrics suggest he'd produce anywhere, but it's worth considering. Leadership and clubhouse presence matter too, even if they're harder to quantify. Bo has been a leader in Toronto's clubhouse for years. He's beloved by teammates. He sets a tone. He's vocal and energetic. Bringing in Marte would mean losing that presence and chemistry. On the flip side, Marte is known as a consummate professional who works hard and leads by example. Different styles, but both valuable in their own ways. The answer to this question could define not just this offseason, but the entire next era of Blue Jays baseball. Are they doubling down on their homegrown core by paying Bo whatever it takes? Or are they pivoting to a new direction by bringing in an established star on a team-friendly deal? Both paths have merit. Both have risk. The decision comes down to how the front office evaluates value, risk tolerance, and their championship window timeline. My take is that if Bo's camp is truly asking for $200 million plus, and if Arizona is willing to have serious trade conversations about Marte, Toronto should absolutely explore the Marte option aggressively. The value proposition is just too compelling to ignore. You're getting elite production, better defense, better health track record, and massive payroll flexibility for roughly half the long-term financial commitment. That's smart business. But I also understand the emotional pull of keeping Bo. He represents everything fans love about player development and organizational identity. Walking away from that isn't easy. Sometimes, though, the right baseball decision and the popular decision aren't the same thing. If Ross Atkins truly believes Marte is the better path forward, he needs the courage to make that call, regardless of potential backlash. We're going to find out very soon which direction Toronto leans. The next 7 to 10 days are absolutely critical for defining this franchise's future. Stay tuned because this offseason is delivering drama and we're just getting started.